Saturday mornings in Maplebridge always felt a little like opening a storybook. The town square, lined with sugar maples that had not yet lost their spring green leaves, filled before dawn with canvas-topped booths and the steady thump of wagon wheels. By 7 o'clock the air carried braids of scent, basil, hot doughnuts, damp straw, and usually the caramel hush of Nora Whitcomb's honey. Usually. On this particular Saturday, Nora lifted the front panel of her booth and gagged. The aroma that poured from her display table was wrong, sharp like pickle brine. 20 freshly labelled jars sat in neat pyramids, their golden contents clouded and fizzing. Nora's stomach dropped. What in the world? She twisted off a lid. A hiss escaped as if she'd opened a bottle of soda. A taste confirmed the worst. The honey was soured, impossible for bees to create on their own. Someone had tampered with Whistle Ridge Apiary's pride and joy. Her neighbour's stall was conspicuously empty. Pete Drummond, the cider vendor famous for juggling apples to lure customers, had not appeared. His chalkboard still promised Sunrise Sweet Cider, first press. Nora checked her watch. Pete was habitually early, the sort who liked to sip coffee and gossip before anyone else arrived. She tried calling. The call went straight to voicemail. Mrs. Lillian Choi, the market manager, appeared, clipboard swinging like a metronome. "Nora, dear, I'm hearing complaints. The Elmhurst twins said your honey tastes like gym socks in juice." "I know." Nora steadied her voice. "Someone sabotaged my jars, and Pete's missing." Mrs. Choi's penciled brows climbed. "Missing? His stall's locked, and he's not answering." The manager exhaled slowly. "We'll refund any customers for your honey, but please sort this out quickly. The Spring Festival is 2 weeks away. We can't afford scandal." The morning slipped into a blur. Nora moved the ruined jars behind a burlap curtain and handed out samples from a reserve crate she kept tucked under the table. Even so, whispers trailed. Is her honey safe? Did she switch suppliers? By noon, she'd sold only half her usual amount. When the final bell rang at 1 o'clock, vendors dismantled booths in practiced motion. Nora packed the fizzing jars into a plastic bin, snapped the lid, and loaded it into her van. She couldn't shake two truths. The sabotage was deliberate, and Pete's absence was not coincidence. Nora kept bees because their logic steadied her. Observe, follow clues, trust the dance. She decided to apply hive thinking to her unusual mystery. Follow the nectar until you find its source. First stop, Drummond Orchards. The farm perched on a ridge 15 minutes outside town, rows of apple trees fanning toward the river. Pete's farmhouse sat dark, shades drawn. Nora knocked, no answer. She circled to the barn and found the sliding doors open. Empty apple crates tiled the floor like toppled dominoes. One crate bore a smear of something amber and sticky. She dipped a finger. Honey, unmistakably hers. Someone had dragged a jar across the wood, leaving a trail toward the loading dock. Beyond that, the tire marks of a small truck cut through the dirt. Pete owned a battered green pickup. The impression here was narrower, recent, and smelled faintly of diesel. Nora snapped pictures on her phone, the way she did when cataloguing hive inspections. A flutter at her feet. Pete's signature market apron lay crumpled beneath a crate. She lifted it carefully. The front pocket held a receipt from Bee Haven Supply, her favorite beekeeping shop, for a food-grade syringe 100 milliliter. She stared at the slip. The saboteur had injected something into the honey through the lids. She'd seen pin-sized punctures near every cap. A syringe matched that theory. But why would Pete buy it? Wind rattled the barn siding, spooking Nora from speculation. If Pete hadn't sabotaged her honey, someone wanted it to look that way. And if he had sabotaged it, where was he now? Back in Maplebridge, Nora made another stop at the Crooked Spoon Cafe. Jonas Wilkes, barista and gossip conduit, waved her over the espresso machine. "Bad day at the fair, Bee Queen?" he asked. "I need information, not honey puns," Nora muttered, and recounted the morning's events. Jonas leaned an elbow on the counter. "I did see Pete last night. He picked up a crate of cinnamon rolls for a crack-of-dawn meeting with someone. He wouldn't say who, only that he might have good news." Jonas filled a mug, then added, "Oh, and Sierra Golden came in after him. New vendor, right?" Nora's shoulders stiffened. Sierra had appeared 2 weeks ago, selling Rocky Mountain wildflower honey for half Nora's price. Her smile was wide, her flannel impeccable, but her product tasted suspiciously bland. Heat-filtered or blended, Nora suspected. "Did Sierra talk to Pete?" she asked. Jonas shrugged. "Maybe. I was tamping espresso, but she left headed towards the river trail, same direction as Pete's truck." A coil of unease tightened in Nora's chest. Sierra's booth, Golden Hive Delights, was already gone when Nora returned to the square. A corner of yellow canvas flapped in the breeze, forgotten. At the curb sat an overstuffed van, Wyoming plates, engine cold. Nora peered inside the windows. Rows of gallon jugs labelled clover syrup lined the floor, but no Sierra. Mrs. Choi approached, arms folded. "Did you find Pete?" "Not yet," Nora admitted. "Have you seen Sierra?" "She packed up right after the lunch rush. Said she was driving to a private tasting." The manager sighed. "I don't like trouble, Nora." "Neither do bees." Nora offered a wry smile. "But they'll sting if pushed." That evening she retreated to her workshop, a renovated carriage house behind her cottage. Yellow-painted walls held stacks of supers and tools. The air smelled of wax and cedar shavings. Nora lined the sabotaged jars on her workbench, unscrewed a lid, and measured pH. The reading was far too low. Someone had added vinegar. She ran a second test, shaking the jar over a bright lamp. Tiny flecks floated, chili seeds. Vinegar and chili would ruin flavour quickly, but leave honey's colour close enough to fool a casual glance. In the right concentration, the mix burned the throat. Customers would spit it out. Why chili? A memory surfaced. Last Saturday, Pete bragged about experimenting with cider-infused hot honey for a barbecue joint. He'd asked if Nora would collaborate. She'd laughed it off. Her focus was purity, single-source flavours. Pete had looked disappointed, but not offended. If someone stole his idea, sabotaged her stock using the same ingredients, then framed Pete. Nora sorted pieces of evidence. 1. Pete absent. 2. Honey sabotaged with cider ingredients. 3. Sierra undercutting prices, last seen near Pete. 4. Receipt for a syringe in Pete's apron. She needed physical proof connecting Sierra to both Pete and the sabotage. The Maplebridge campground edged the river on the opposite side of town. By 9 o'clock, the sky hovered lavender. Frogs struck up their nightly chorus. Sierra's van sat at site Namion 12, fairy lights strung between 2 birch trees. Nora parked her car down the lane and walked, rehearsing excuses. Maybe she'd claim curiosity about Sierra's wildflower mix. Yet the site was unattended. A camp chair lay folded, the fire pit cold. Nora noticed a red tackle box half tucked under the picnic table. She knelt, lifted the lid, and exhaled. Inside lay 4 food-grade syringes, small vials of chili extract, and a 3-ounce bottle of apple cider vinegar. A twig snapped behind her. What are you doing with my stuff? Sierra's voice cracked like gravel. She stood at the path's edge, hair loose, cheeks wind-burned. An unzipped backpack dangled from her shoulder. Nora straightened, heart hammering. Looking for answers. My honey was ruined and Pete Drummond vanished. Care to explain the syringes? Sierra's gaze flitted past Nora, as though gauging escape routes. Then her shoulders sagged. I can explain, but I need coffee first, and maybe a lawyer. That depends on how good the explanation is, Nora said. Sierra motioned to the picnic bench. Fine, sit. They ended up across from each other, the tackle box between them like a mediator. Night insects hummed. I'm not the villain you think, Sierra began. I came here to start over. My family's apiary burned down last year. Insurance barely covered Dad's medical bills. I needed fast money, so I bought bulk honey downstate to resell here. Not proud of it, but tourists can't tell the difference. Nora listened, arms folded. Last week, Pete cornered me, Sierra continued. He'd tasted my honey, saw through the act. Said he'd keep quiet if I helped him with a gimmick, spicy cider honey. He gave me a list of supplies. She gestured at the tackle box. He said he'd pay me after the first batch. Why sabotage my honey? Sierra's eyes widened. I didn't. I thought you two were friends. I was supposed to meet Pete behind the orchard barn this morning at 6 to hand off the syringes and extracts, but he never showed. I got spooked and left, I swear. Then where were you all day? Selling. I left early because I still had to track Pete down for payment. Nora processed the confession. Sierra had motive to mask her cheap honey, but sabotaging Nora's product risked extra scrutiny. On the other hand, framing Sierra now seemed easy. She possessed the tools. Did you see anyone else at the orchard? Nora asked. Just a truck I didn't recognize, Sierra said. White, no markings, idling near the loading dock. Nora felt the puzzle pieces shift. Maple Bridge's only unmarked white truck belonged to Gus Porcelli, cheesemonger extraordinaire. He used it for refrigerated deliveries. Gus's creamery storefront sat dark when Nora arrived, Sierra reluctantly in tow. They found the side door unlocked. Reefers hummed at the back. Inside, shelves of aging wheels exhaled buttery musk. Gus, Nora called. No reply. She edged along the hallway toward the walk-in cooler. A heavy metal door stood ajar. She grabbed the handle and yanked. Cold mist billowed out. On the tiled floor, wrapped in a wool blanket and propped against milk crates, sat Pete Drummond. His wrists were bound with cheese twine. A strip of duct tape half hung from his beard. He blinked at the sudden light. About time, he croaked, shivering. They freed him, helped him into the office where an electric heater glowed. Colour seeped back into his cheeks as Nora poured him hot water from Gus's kettle. What happened, Pete? She asked. Gus happened, he rasped. We were partnering on a charcuterie experience for the festival, cider, honey, cheese. He wanted exclusivity. When I asked to include your honey, he blew up. That explains some jealousy, not kidnapping. Pete rubbed his wrists. I told him I'd only drop you if you agreed. He said fine, meet at the orchard before market to discuss terms. When I got there, he pulled a knife, not on me, just waved it, said he'd make sure neither you nor I sold another jar if we crossed him. Next thing I knew, he jammed something over my face, smelled like vinegar, and I woke up here. Nora's mouth went dry. He sabotaged my honey to ruin my reputation, then tried to frame Sierra and you. Pete nodded. He bragged about using artisan pickling vinegar to taint your stock. Sierra swallowed hard, and my syringes made it easy. Footsteps clacked on the cement hallway. Gus Porcelli filled the doorway, silhouette broad as a barrel, apron smeared with curds. "What are you doing in my shop?" he barked, then saw Pete alive, Nora holding a phone, Sierra clutching the evidence kit. His shoulders slumped. Nora lifted her camera. "Smile, Gus. Bees remember faces, and so does 1080p. He sighed. "I just wanted the festival to be perfect. My cheeses front and center. You farmers act like you're saving the world. Meanwhile, my aging cave costs more than your entire apiary." "Sabotage and kidnapping aren't marketing strategies," Nora said coolly, dialing 911. By midnight, Maplebridge's single patrol car had ferried Gus to the county station. Statements were taken, and Pete was checked for hypothermia. Sierra, cleared of wrongdoing, agreed to dispose of her imported honey and apprentice with Nora to learn ethical beekeeping. She insisted on reimbursing customers first. Nora offered to help. On Sunday morning, Nora returned to the square to mend what damage remained. She brewed lemon balm tea and set 3 chairs in front of her booth. The sign read, "Free tasting and story time. Ask what really happened." Crowds gathered, lured by horror-tinged curiosity and the irresistible pull of fresh gossip. Nora told the tale simply, giving credit where due, blaming only the guilty. She poured generous samples of her untouched reserve honey, its sunlight-coloured ribbon silencing any lingering doubt. Pete performed a juggling routine with apples and a cheese wheel for theatrical closure. Sierra, wearing a borrowed Whistle Ridge apiary cap, demonstrated how to spot true raw honey. Slow drip, floral nose, tiny bits of pollen visible if you tilt the jar toward daylight. By noon, Nora's stock was sold out, and customers were signing a petition to let her bees forage in the unused community garden plot. The market buzzed, quite literally, with healed trust. Mrs. Choi approached, cheeks pink. "You turned catastrophe into theatre, Nora. The spring festival is saved?" Nora smiled, wiping honey from a ladle. "Bees taught me. When the hive is threatened, the best defense is clarity. Show the intruder the door, then keep dancing." Mrs. Choi laughed. "Will you chair the safety committee?" Nora groaned but accepted. Mysteries, she'd learned, prefer a vigilant audience. Sunset bathed Maplebridge in amber light. Nora, Sierra, and Pete walked towards the parking lot, exhaustion sweet as clover on their tongues. "I still can't believe Gus used my own cider idea against me," Pete muttered. "Next time, vet your partners," Nora advised. "And keep better track of your syringes," Sierra added, bumping him playfully. Nora paused beside her van. Bees hummed inside their travel nukes, ready for a trip to the orchard blossoms that would open any day now. Pete had offered free pasture as apology for the vinegar fiasco. "Truth is," Nora said, "sabotage stings, but community heals faster than honey crystallizes." Sierra sniffed. "Is that another bee proverb?" "Just a fact," Nora replied, opening the door. The evening air smelled the way she liked her honey, warm, steady, and uncorrupted. In Maplebridge, that was more than enough for a happy ending, at least until the next mystery decided to buzz.